Recording.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good morning, all.
There. Welcome, everyone.
We'll give it the standard
Hopefully.
minute or so to have everyone log on and settle in before we start.
Hope you're all enjoying the Santa Barbara fall day we're having. High of 70. How about that? I'm in a long time.
It's nice to put on a sweater.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We'll probably just go ahead and get started with the holiday. Presumably, it's why a lot of folks couldn't be here. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And if you're here, even though it's a holiday and you weren't supposed to, we appreciate you. My name is Catherine Soto Vazquez with SB Act, and I have a couple of team members here. If you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Absolutely.
Hi, Landon.
Go
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm Landon. I'm the operations manager for SB Act.
And I'm Rich Sander. I'm the executive director. Thank you all for being here with us. We've got some good information to share.
So today we wanted to dedicate this meeting to the shelter survey results and just have a conversation around the information that we'll be giving you and kind of what we want to do with that information, the next steps, and really just put it to you all as to how we want to share this information, utilize it to the best of our system's ability. So that's mainly what we're going to be talking about today. And then at the end, I do know that I believe Kimberly with the county will have, she wanted to circle back about some information regarding dignity moves and outreach. So that'll be taking place afterwards. And I will have Landon go ahead and start with his portion. And then if you just want to introduce yourselves in the chat, I know it's a smaller group and we may know each other, but it's always helpful for those that don't.
All right, is everyone able to see the PowerPoint slides? Great. So, thanks everyone. As Catherine said, we're going to be sharing the data from the shelter survey. And so this was an idea that was conceived with SB Act with folks like Raj Powell, who's on this call. Huge thanks to Raj for pushing this, as well as some others from the Lived Experience Working Group, with the goal of trying to find out what has the experience been like for people experiencing homelessness in our community in the various shelter settings that we have in our community. And so we worked with Raj and members of the Lived Experience Working Group to try and formulate the survey in such a way that it would adequately capture the experiences of people experiencing homelessness in our community, as well as those who have lived experience and have stayed in the shelters in the past. So again, thanks to Raj and thanks to Lived Experience members who helped us to create this. And huge thanks also to all the shelter providers who are willing to help us to get this survey administered. We worked from, I'd say, about June to August to administer this survey at both the NNC sites, so at the commuter lot, at the rescue mission, and at the Alameda Park, as well as at PATH, at Salvation Army, at the rescue mission, transition house, domestic violence solutions shelter, as well as Noah's Anchorage. So we really had a lot of buy-in, and it's thanks to you all that we were able to get as much data as we have. So I'm excited to share that with you today. As I jump in, please do feel free to jump in with any questions. You can raise your hand or just throw them up in the chat window and we'll go from there. But our goal really will be to share this data and then have a little discussion about what do we want to do with this moving forward. So just to start, we received 184 total responses on the shelter survey. So as I indicated, these were not only individuals that are currently staying in shelters, these were also individuals who are just experiencing homelessness. We specifically wanted to try and capture experiences of some people who were not staying in the shelters to understand why they weren't. In terms of demographics, as far as adult populations, we had a fairly well-rounded bell curve. And it's not too far off from our point in time count age demographic data. And similarly with the gender identity question, we actually had a little bit higher proportion of women than in our point in time count. In terms of ethnicity and race, we were just over 50% not Hispanic Latino and just under 50% Hispanic or Latino. And then similarly to our point in time count data, close to 70% identifying as white or Caucasian, with a sampling beyond that. We did ask where the individual stayed the night before they took the survey, and more than 60% of those who took the survey said they'd stayed at a congregate shelter the night before. We did have some others, which included like dignity moves, and then a good number that had stayed in temporary housing or in outdoors or on the streets. And then we also asked them to just tell us all the different kinds of settings in which they had stayed in the last year. And close to 75% had stayed in a congregate shelter at some point in the last year, as well as 45% had stayed outdoors in the streets in the last year. In terms of how people were living, so about 80% of those who took the survey indicated they're staying alone, and about 20% were staying with a family or domestic partner. And this was fairly representative. When we surveyed a transition house, we got about 29 surveys back, which is around what we got here. In terms of whether individuals had used shelter services in Santa Barbara, we asked them, hey, it doesn't matter if you've stayed overnight. Have you ever gone to one of the shelters and even gotten a meal? And so 90% of the people said they had used at least some form of services from our shelters in Santa Barbara at some point, and 10% said they never had. And again, we still wanted to include those who never had utilized the shelter services in town, because we wanted to understand their perspectives too, like if there was a reason why they hadn't. And so you can see in terms of the shelters that had been utilized, about 60% of those who took the survey had at one point stayed in the rescue mission. About 50% had stayed in PATH at one point. About 30% had stayed in Salvation Army, and a little under 20% had stayed at Transition House. I mentioned the other down there at the bottom pink bar. That includes things like Dignity Moves. We also had a handful of people who mentioned they had stayed in Casa Esperanza, so many years ago. But I want to be clear too that in general, some of these people had stayed in these shelter settings, but it had been a long time since they had stayed there. So this question was not asking if they had stayed there just in the last year, but it was inclusive of all experiences. And then we asked again how recently individuals had stayed in any of these shelters or used any of their services, and about 60% said they had used shelter services in the last day. And then another 15% said they had stayed or used shelter services within the last month. So we feel confident that we have a good sampling of individuals who had recent exposure and experiences. So then we asked what kinds of services had been used. And not surprisingly, the meals are the most used. Overnight stays were actually third behind meals and showers. And so we know that some of our shelters offer meals even for individuals who are not staying there overnight. We did ask if you've never used shelter services in Santa Barbara, why have you never used shelter services in the city of Santa Barbara? We only had 7 individuals who answered this question. The main response was just, I don't feel comfortable in a shelter setting. And then we got a little bit more clarity in some later questions as to why that was the case, and we'll talk about that later. But as I said, this particular bar graph is only representative of 7 individuals. So I'm going to jump into some of the key findings about what were some of the top 5 things that help people feel comfortable and uncomfortable in the shelter settings, how safe they felt, questions like that. But I want to be clear that these questions were not shelter specific. So at no point did we ask, tell us about PATH. What are the best things about PATH? What are the worst things about PATH? Tell us about Transition House. We never asked questions like that. The questions were all general in nature. And so it was more like, tell us what were the things that made you feel most comfortable in the shelters in Santa Barbara where you've stayed. And so as I say that, I later on, I filtered out the data from people who said, yes, I have stayed at PATH at one point. And so you'll be able to see some of their feedback side by side with individuals who've stayed at the rescue mission, et cetera. But I just want to make it abundantly clear, these are not people answering questions specifically about PATH or the rescue mission. These are just individuals who said, yes, I have stayed at PATH, and here's my general feedback about shelters in Santa Barbara. So maybe they've also stayed at rescue mission, et cetera. I'll keep returning to this point because I think it's important. I don't want to be communicating this data inaccurately about how people are actually sharing. Let me just check the chat. I'm seeing some messages. Okay. So first of all, just general findings. The question was, what made you feel the most comfortable in a shelter setting? And individuals were asked to choose the top 5. We gave them a list of about 20 different factors, things like good food, things like it was safe, I had a private shower, et cetera. And so of all of those 20 options, these 5 were the most frequently selected. So the staff and volunteers was selected by more than 55% of the people who took this survey. They said that staff and volunteers were one of the factors that made them feel the most comfortable. So I do just want to give big kudos to our staff and volunteers at all of our shelters for their work to make individuals feel comfortable. They also indicated, 50% indicated that the shelters had a welcoming environment. 45% mentioned a clean sleeping area. About 45% said that they experienced a sense of safety, and 43% said that they experienced good food in the shelter settings. So again, these were just the top 5 factors. So it's possible that some of those other factors were just below that, but we wanted to highlight these. So now I just want to show a little comparison side by side. Let me see if I can move my screen a little bit. So again, we did not ask them specific about any of the shelters, but I did want to filter out the data. So that first green column there shows of the individuals who stayed at PATH, which were the top 5. And then that second green column is of the individuals who have indicated that they have stayed at Rescue Mission at one point, what were the top 5, et cetera. So I only showed this for the top 4 shelters because the other 2, we had so many fewer participants. But you can see just a little bit of difference here in terms of which things came in and out of the top 5. For example, with PATH, the good food jumped up. That was one of the higher rated things, or more frequently chosen top 5 items. Similarly, with Transition House, as I think we could all understand, having separate sleeping quarters was in the top 5 for things that made individuals feel comfortable staying there. And I'll just pause here for a second. Is this making sense the way I'm presenting this? I want to make sure that everyone's tracking, at least to the best of your understanding.
Yes, thank you, Landon.
Please do feel free to stop me with any questions. So the next question we asked was about what were the top 5 factors that made you feel uncomfortable in a shelter setting or made you feel less comfortable? So the top factor overall was having communal sleeping areas. The second was the use of drugs and alcohol in or around the shelters, having a strict curfew at the shelters, feeling unsafe, and then other. And often what the other entailed was having items stolen was one of the key ones. Feeling judged by other individuals staying at the shelter setting, or feeling not feeling supported in their desire for sobriety because they were around other individuals who were not pursuing sobriety. One thing I thought was interesting is that whereas when we look at what they chose for the top 5 for the things that made them feel most comfortable, you can see that the percentages are much higher. More than half of the people that took the survey chose staff and volunteers in the top 5. Whereas when it comes to things that made them feel less comfortable, less than 30% chose the number 1 thing, communal sleeping area. So this is indicative that the things that make people feel uncomfortable were a lot more spread out. It wasn't as concentrated. It was a smaller proportion of the people chose each of the individual responses. And I'll just show the side-by-side comparison. So you can see here's where it changes quite a bit in terms of what individuals' experiences were. And we've spoken with all the different shelter providers listed here about some of these things. And I think these are, many of them expressed, yeah, this is not something that this is not a surprise. The things that they saw were listed as things that made people feel less comfortable. And I'll leave this up for just a second. There's a lot of information here, so we will be sharing this out. I'm going to go to the next slide, and please do keep just writing down your thoughts or reactions or questions so we can talk about them at the end. We asked about the feeling of safety in their most recent shelter experience. You can see that about 80% of people said they were at least neutral, and then about 60% of people said they felt moderately safe to very safe in the shelter experience they most recently had. A little less than 20% indicated that they felt some degree of unsafe in the most recent shelter experience they had. And so here's the breakdown filtered by the individuals that had stayed at each of the individual shelters. Just to be a broken record about it, again, we did not ask how safe did you feel at PATH or how safe did you feel at Rescue Mission. We just asked how safe did you feel in your most recent. And then I filtered the results based on people who said they have stayed at these shelters. We asked what would make individuals feel more open to accepting a referral to a shelter environment. And on a whole, private showers was the most frequently selected at 44%, followed by separate sleeping quarters at 41%, feeling supported in their personal goals and priorities at 40%, having locked storage area or secure storage lockers, and 35% or other. And then under other, we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but again, there was a sense of more security, especially around possessions being stolen, even if there is a locked storage area. Having clearer rules, maybe even handed out to guests as they arrive. Staff treating individuals fairly across everyone who's coming into the shelter setting, and a few other things. I'll share a few of the quotes at the end. And then just to break down here by shelter. And then I just want to go to this final question was, what other kinds of services do you want to see in a shelter setting? What additional services? Transportation services was the top at about 50%, indicating the ability to travel to or from the shelter site. Having more access to housing services, 49% individuals talked about feeling like that when they were at the shelters, they could get to the next step, but then from there, they maybe weren't able to keep going down the road to get housing. Having the ability to stay at or around the shelter for longer hours, for example, being on the property all day, as we can imagine, this was more representative at certain shelters than others, given the policies that are different shelters, followed by recreation areas and skills classes. And so here you can see the breakdown by shelter. So I want to just show a couple of the quotes. At the very end, we asked, can you give us just some any other general feedback about the shelters? And we got a lot of things, both positive and negative, a lot of compliments toward the staff, a lot of compliments toward the sense of feeling welcome and safe. And then other individuals talking about things like the stealing being an issue, even if there was locked storage. So I'm just going to leave these up here for a minute for everyone to read through. We had quite a few more. I just pulled a little sampling, and we'll be sharing out some of those quotes. So I'll leave these up for a minute, but I did want to move to just a little bit of discussion about this. We first just want to say thank you again to everyone who helped disseminate the survey, everyone who helped to formulate the survey. As I mentioned, Raj and others who really pushed this forward, and thanks to all the shelters for helping us get this out. We want to see this used. As we've talked with the shelter providers, we've been asking them to share with us some of their initial thoughts, but we really want to say we're sharing this with each of you in the hopes that your shelter or service provider can use this data, whether it's to apply for grant funds to be able to increase services or whatever that may be. We'll also be taking this to city staff, to city council as well, just to share with them, as well as other working groups. But I really want to get some of your initial feedback, questions, or comments. And then after that, we'll move to talking about sort of what could we do with some of these findings. So I'd like to open it up for any feedback or questions. Yes, I see Raj.
Yes, in 2021 and 2022, I was out on the street, mainly State Street, and had had a lot of interaction with the ambassadors, and I was full of questions, especially about, I was getting actual information coming from the ambassadors that a lot of homeless who had stayed in the shelter were not happy with the way the staff was treating them in one particular shelter. I will leave that unnamed in respect for that shelter. And this particular ambassador that I interacted with for many hours said that there were a lot of complaints coming from the homeless. So what I would like to add with that is, hopefully it has gotten better in this particular shelter. It appears that it has. And also with the 7 people that would not stay in the shelter, I've spoken with numerous amounts of homeless people that absolutely refuse to stay in the shelter. So I don't think that 7 people really accurately represents numerous amounts of people, of homeless people that I've spoken to, that absolutely refuse to stay in the shelter. So I just wanted to add that, Landon. Thank you for giving me the time to do that.
No, thank you, Raj. I really appreciate your feedback. Just to clarify, so this one actually is, the 7 people said they had never used shelter services. So there were actually quite a few people who said they have stayed in various of the shelters in the past, but they never would again. So I think those people were captured in the survey. These 7 were just individuals who had literally never set foot in any of the shelters in the city of Santa Barbara.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that, Landon.
Definitely. Can I ask too, Raj, did the things that you saw ranked as the top 5 comfortable and uncomfortable, did those ring true from your experience?
Run that by me again, the top 5. I can't see it because I'm on my phone.
Oh, that's okay. Maybe I'll type it into the chat window and then we can come back to it.
Okay.
And in the meantime, I think Jonathan, you had your hand raised as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank SB Act team again for putting this together. I know that Path was really excited to see the results that came from this, whether it was positive or negative things being said. It gives us a roadmap of what we need to do to improve the quality of services. And I think a lot of the feedback that that we've received individually from clients and what we've heard and what we know anecdotally to be true, it's great to see it actually quantified in this survey. Especially the slide that I really appreciated, where I really felt like overall, I'm excited to see the voice is elevated of the people that we serve. And the slide where it says that the residents want to see more transportation services, housing services, and skill classes. That really kind of speaks to what we're also seeing of just really kind of a need to beef up the quality of supportive services that are offered in the shelters, and just the fact that we also know that people don't like to feel like they're being crammed into a place, and so I think what I'm looking forward to with this survey is that this survey informs the service design of shelters moving forward, and even helping to evaluate existing program designs of existing shelters that we have. But I just think overall it was a really good survey, and we're excited to kind of take it back to see what improvements we can make, and especially as funding opportunities arise.
Thanks, Jonathan. And Jonathan, if I can put you on the spot too, I think you had a good quote when we talked with you the other day about these findings. You shared that you felt like what it helps us to capture is the need for a focus on quality of services over how do we simply serve the most people, but how do we make these services as quality as we possibly can?
100%, yes.
Other thoughts or comments?
Thank you. I really think this is really great information, and I think it should be shared far and wide, not just among service providers, but among funding agencies, that they can get a sense of what we need to do collectively as a community in terms of what services we need to be providing and funding. I really appreciate this survey.
That's great. Thanks, Liz. And maybe that does need to be one of our top priorities here for presentations is identifying the funders that this needs to be shared with.
And I know you mentioned, we're going to share it with city staff and city council, but really just making sure that all of the elected leaders in our community have this survey as new funding comes down. So I think, when we're looking at increasing shelter capacities or increasing shelter beds, whether it's in a new location or a already existing location, I think this feedback is really valuable in seeing that that's really our population. The folks on the street are really wanting to move away from that congregate shelter idea, interim housing or whatever it is, that they're wanting to have a more dignified space where they have their own quarters. So I think that that's something that's really kind of going, I don't say against our beliefs currently in the way our system is now operating, but I do think that it is a new trajectory that we need to have a larger discussion about.
Thank you, Liz. Your comment about the Elected Leaders Forum.
Yeah, I don't know when the next one is, so, but that would be great. I think.
This is Kimberly. The next one is on November 4th, I believe. And we actually are doing a panel of persons with lived experience. So it might be a really good, segue sort of to do both, right? So the people who are there to share specifically their thoughts, and then also a wider group, right, that's been surveyed. So I think it'll actually work really well. So Landon and Catherine, Lucille and I will work with you on that. Great suggestion.
That would be great.
Great, thank you.
Yes,
Raj,
Raj.
your hand is up.
Yeah, so I was looking at the percentages of the survey on what made you feel uncomfortable, and so those percentages are based on the homeless that you surveyed.
Yeah, so what it means is that if it says 55%, it means that 55% of the people who took the survey said that thing was in their top 5. Like their top 5 things that made them feel the most uncomfortable or comfortable. It's a little, it's kind of weirdly, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So my point is here is, the people that the homeless unhoused that I've spoken with, and I've spoken to many, I think the percentages on what made them feel uncomfortable, the list that you did, I think that's a really good list. I think it would be much higher. And on the amount of people that I've spoken with that I felt uncomfortable for those reasons that's in the survey.
So that'll be interesting to share then with more individuals with lived experience. It's possible that was, like, for example, the number one thing that people said made them feel less comfortable was having a communal sleeping area.
Yes.
And what we're about just under 30% of people. So it's possible that a lot of people put that in their top 10, but maybe it wasn't in their top 5. So it's just, it's the way that the survey was done. They got to choose from a lot of options.
Right. Right. Because I've spoken with a lot of people that feel very uncomfortable about, the communal bed situations and shelters. And I've also spoken with a lot of service providers that we need to change that. And I've spoken with many service providers and the homeless about that that we need to create like a small little room similar to what the Salvation Army has done, no more than 2 people to a room, and with a door would definitely help provide more dignity for individuals. We need to have a new paradigm in that area. I think that would really help the healing of the homeless process.
Thanks, Raj. I think I'll work with you. I want to do a presentation with the lived experience working group or anyone at one of the NNCs who wants to see it. And so it might be nice to work with you on that. And then if that's something, also we'd encourage shelters to share with your guests as well, just so we can report back to them. Yes, we did actually finish this survey, so that they know that this data is being used. Yeah, absolutely, Gene. The surveys are never 100% accurate. And as you saw, we have 184 people surveyed here. So this is just a percentage of the individuals with lived experience in the city of Santa Barbara. Any other thoughts or comments?
Just curious. I think I only see past staff here. I'm curious as to how this information was received by some of the other shelters. I understand you met with some of these other agencies.
So it's been well received. They've all, pretty much across the board, everyone said, yep, this isn't too surprising. The negative things were not too surprising to them. Or in one case, the shelter said, oh yeah, that thing, we've actually been trying to work on that thing. So really our task at this point is to follow up and say, okay, so what is your plan? What is the next step for you? So right now, as I said, we've shared with PATH, Santa Barbara Rescue Mission, Salvation Army, and Transition House.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the next question is, so what do we do about this information? And I think that's something we should be conversing with all the providers and the funders in the community. So look forward to that.
Jonathan, I feel like you're always on the spot in these meetings, so I'm sorry to put you on the spot again. But as the sole shelter provider here, do you have any initial thoughts just right now about what you want to do with the data?
Yeah, I mean,
and I know you may need more time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what I'm kind of hoping is similar to what Liz was sharing is like, how does this inform our funders and electeds, because I know that there is a desire to do more shelters, and there's conversation around congregate versus non-congregate, and what does the service model look like. And so I think that this really highlights that we need to look at shelters differently. And I know that in a lot of communities that we're working in, communities are kind of designing them differently. Like we have some shelters that have built-in new transportation services that are available to take people to appointments. We have shelters that have built-in more like housing navigation services that proportionate to the number of people served per year, and some shelters have built-in clinical staff, like having clinical case managers that are able to kind of appropriately assess the complexities of the folks that are coming in. I know that one of the things that SB Act has heard me share data out on is, since we've shifted to low barrier, we've seen, nearly a triple percentage increase in the number of people that we're serving who are chronically homeless and have a history of mental illness, and so I think making sure that like as the political pressure is felt by our electeds, that this data stays in the forefront of their minds so that as solutions are being developed, that it's also being cognizant of the people that we serve, that we're doing it in a way that is emphasizing quality and the dignity of people who are staying there.
Yes, Raj.
You know, one thought that just a very important thought that just came to me, that we really there needs to be a real focus on this particular item, and that is you know, I stayed in one of the shelters one time, and I spoke with one of the people that were at that worked at Path for a long time. And something that really needs to be accomplished is separating the addicts from the people that are working on staying sober and staying clean. This has been a real problem in certain shelters, the mixture. So that should be a very high priority for a shelter.
Thanks,
I just
Raj.
wanna-
And
I just wanted to acknowledge Raj's comment and say, like, we hear you. I think we're talking a lot about like how to balance low barrier with folks who are you know, actively practicing sobriety and engaged in services. So thank you for sharing that.
also want to acknowledge Rob Frederick's comment in the chat, and the answer is ultimately permanent housing. We're very much with you on that. That's largely been the main emphasis of this working group to date. However, with this initiative, working with individuals with lived experience, this was something that was a felt need from the individuals with the lived experience, and so we wanted to honor that and then and bring these findings forward.
Oh yeah,
and I do see a question. No, go ahead.
I was gonna, since you acknowledged my comment, I just wanted to say for the group, you know, this data is really good to share, and again, it's, you know, if I were in a situation where I needed shelter, I would really hold safety and dignity at the highest levels of where I would go versus not going. And I think if we can possibly reimagine how we provide services, shelter services, both the physical and the non-physical services, that would be very helpful for our community.
This is Kimberly. I was just going to add on the permanent housing piece. I think we've seen something with the emergency housing voucher model, that with the rental subsidy and the services costs, even with landlord incentives, et cetera, you know, we were previously thinking more when we're talking about permanent supportive housing is having to build it, right? Having to build a Veracruz Village or a Pescadero Lofts, and you know, those are hundreds of thousands of dollars per unit. But what we've seen with the voucher, right, is if we can pair the right services with the subsidy, that it's actually cheaper to house someone now in permanent than what it is for the non-congregate interim housing. And so I think that it's really, really important, even though I'm going to talk in just a minute about, you know, some more interim housing, we just really want to keep that at the forefront, that there is limited resources. Even though we hear about these big dollar amounts, they come in very small buckets. They don't come in a big pot that we get to decide. And so we really want to keep in mind that I think it's over 85% of folks who enter our shelter do need some kind of subsidy to exit, because our housing market, right, is so expensive. And so we know this is only a stopping point, and that we have to have the affordable housing and services on the other side.
Thank you, Kimberly. With that, we will segue, because I do want to make sure we have time to talk about CES and dignity moves. Our next steps from our end will be to work on some of these presentations. I have in my notes now from our meeting today to work with the city on lists of funders that we should be speaking with, to share this with our lived experience working group, and also find other opportunities to share this with individuals with lived experience, as well as individuals at the shelters, to share with the elected leaders forum. And then one of our final follow-ups will be to circle back with the shelter providers and ask, okay, what is your shelter planning to do with this data, so that we can hear some concrete next steps, whatever that may be. I know it'll be very different for each site. But I really want to thank you all for this great conversation today. And as I said, we'll send these out. I've already sent the full results to each of the shelters that we have had this conversation with. And so we'll go from there. But I will stop my sharing and pass it to Kimberly.
Yeah, appreciate being able to come on. It's been quite a few months that since we talked about sort of the how people get into dignity moves, and so wanted to make sure that everyone in the community was really clear on how the process worked and how it continues to work today. So really back in March of 2022, we started working diligently on how we would identify folks to reside at the new Dignity Move Santa Barbara project. And really the couple things, we needed to have the greatest impact on the surrounding area so that more of these projects can be built, just like we were just talking about. And that also the goal was to have a balance of persons with varied service needs. And because we were using a bridge housing model, we also talked about persons that did have a path to housing. And so we looked at the point in time count data and saw that in the area between Gutierrez, De La Vina, Micheltorena, and Laguna Streets, there was a population of over 200 individuals just in that rectangle around the project that were unsheltered. About 35% of those folks were in vehicles, unsheltered in vehicles. And so we decided to use the coordinated entry system to identify and refer, and Housing First and kind of best practices now do allow us to target that geographic group. We can't hold a bed open, under those policies, like we can't wait for someone from a certain group to fill a bed. But as long as we're maintaining a pool of applicants that meet that targeting group, we can use the coordinated entry system. So Emily Allen used a Google referral form. So we were looking for those with established history in that rectangle. And so we really depended on our providers to fill out a Google form that just briefly highlighted who, because on the pit, right, we just knew that there were 200 people. We didn't necessarily know exactly who they were, even though sometimes we have names from the pit, which we also helped inform the list. But then providers were asked to fill out a referral form that just showed kind of who had established history in that area to establish that pool of targeted folks. And so we have had 132 individuals that have been from a provider referred that showed they had the established history in that geographic area. And so far we've had 34 individuals, 36 individuals, I think, enter the site. There's about 31 of those 132 that haven't been we haven't had another case conferencing meeting to really look at that group. But wanted everyone just to really realize that was how it went. How did we establish the path to housing? So because there were vouchers, et cetera, available at that time, we first tried to say on that referral form, the provider would show kind of what the path to housing was, and then found that wasn't working really well. We didn't want to create so much barrier. So we really looked, when we looked at that pool of 132, I guess it was 101 at that point, because we've added 31 since then. People that were prioritized in permanent supportive housing group 1 or rapid rehousing group 1, which again, I don't want to get so much in the weeds, but just know that those are sort of groups that would be next in line for some of our various housing interventions. And so we started working, we worked really diligently in the Tuesday South County COP meetings, where that list was reviewed multiple times. So everyone was really aware of who was on the list and if their client was on the list yet. And then we met, because we did meet in private with Good Samaritan to make the actual referrals. And the reason was because there were a few concerns that came up about persons that actually had orders not to reside in that area because of its proximity to the courts. Anyway, a little bit in the weeds there, but so we met and we recently did an audit to make sure that those who were the coordinated entry system had referred for the project are the only ones that entered. And we were 100% on that. Good Samaritan only brought folks in that had been referred from the coordinated entry system. And to date, we're at 60% of those who have entered Dignity Moves were chronically homeless. Many of them in permanent supportive housing, priority group 1, which would be those highest acuity of needs, even though, like I said, our emergency services, we do not use like for permanent supportive housing. Emergency services are not prioritized based on severity of needs. So the county has identified 3 additional sites to expand another 240 beds of interim housing. And so more to come on that. So this really is our test project, right? About how it works, how we get people in, how we do that fairly through the coordinated entry system. And so I just really wanted to make sure that everyone knew exactly how it happened. I was in all those meetings. Like I said, we've done an audit of who came in. And so we are hearing a little bit of rumbling of, why didn't so-and-so get in? Or, you know, why didn't this happen? Which is totally normal, right? We had 200 people in a rectangle and 132 are already on the list as verified with established history in that area. And we've only brought in 36 folks. But I can tell you that the most common answer for names I was able to look at people saying, why didn't this person get in? Is they're not even have the established history verified. So really encourage the amazing providers that have continued to do those referral forms and verify that history to continue to do that and get folks on the list, even though we realize now it's a large pool that we're pulling from. If you're a provider and you are uncertain of how to do that referral, I see Emily Allen's on the call, but we're happy to share that link again, and they will be working in the outreach team meeting to review those lists again. So just really wanted to make sure that everyone was really understanding sort of how the process worked and how people wound up in the project, and that obviously there's just a critical need for more of these type of units because people do seem to very much want to reside there. So I'm here to answer questions and just make sure there's no confusion. All right. Well, that was easier than I thought. We'll also then really quickly, because I know we're about out of time, we are past that October 1st date. I wanted to share with this group again to make sure that everyone was understanding sort of the shift that's happened, is that we had different coronavirus relief fund dollars have come in, but we had a large amount of coronavirus relief dollars that came in right after the homeless emergency aid program was, as it was ending. We were very fortunate to have a large amount, similar size to the of coronavirus relief dollars that came in, that allowed us to continue some wonderful rapid rehousing and street outreach projects. As of 9/30, which is just 10 days ago, most of that funding now has been expended. And we had a number of what we called in the county cliffs, right, where a number of those funding sources were ending. And so in order to keep moving forward with things like the home key projects, the interim housing that I'm talking about now, and even the Dignity Moves project, Hedges House of Hope, the pallets being in Lompoc, to expand interim housing, to do encampment response, and to have any additional street outreach, the County Board of Supervisors designated state and local fiscal recovery funds that could have been used for roads, could have been used for parks. They had over 26 million in their American Rescue Plan Act funds to sustain all of, to somewhat sustain some of these projects that were moving forward. But what that means is that, you know, things shift a little bit. So the largest investment in street outreach with the state and local fiscal recovery funds, COVID recovery funds, the American Rescue Plan Act, have gone to the Behavioral Wellness Department. We heard on many calls that SB Act facilitated, as well as the Community Action Plan, that people wanted more mental health services on the street in the field. And so hopefully everyone has seen the new vans that allow actually for treatment and assessment at the neighborhood navigations and centers and such in a private environment. But the County Board of Supervisors, through those ARPA funds, largely invested in the Behavioral Wellness Department to expand their multidisciplinary staffing, and also a street outreach for us to identify a nonprofit service provider in order to continue some other street outreach, which is really more focused on encampment response, but does allow some street outreach to still be funded, again, with those ARPA dollars. So Good Samaritan Shelter is now offering those shelter services. And so as of 10/1, you know, that's kind of a change in our system. But we do see lots of hopefully you guys will have New Beginnings on to share about their new veteran funding. So if you find a veteran on the street, we want to make sure that you're reaching out to New Beginnings. Youth and Family Services and Fighting Back Santa Maria were just awarded large amounts of funding from the Continuum of Care in order to serve our unaccompanied youth. And so we just really wanted to, again, kind of make everyone aware that we are having a little bit changes as funding sources end. And we're so grateful to the Board of Supervisors for having stepped up with such a large amount to keep so many of these really important projects moving. Any questions for me? All right.
Thank you for these
that
updates.
helps.
Really.
Anytime, always reach out. You know, I would much rather take on a question and provide clarity if there appears to be misunderstanding in the community about any of our processes or how funding's being awarded. Almost all of our funding is performance-based, right? Where we have a rank and review panel that's scoring projects, et cetera. So always happy to answer questions about that.
Thank you, Kimberly. And as we wrap up, I have an announcement to make, or information that I wanted to share with you all. This Thursday, the 13th, in partnership with the County Housing Authority and the City of Goleta, we are hosting a forum at the Super 8, or what was Super 8, now the Home Key Project in Goleta. We're hosting a forum. It's going to be taking place at 6 p.m. for the community to find out more about the project and have any questions answered that they may have. There's going to be a brief presentation, a little walkthrough of the property. We're going to be able to see a unit on the property. It's not anywhere near close to finishing, but we just wanted to give kind of a view of what the room size is and what the potential is going to be. So that'll be taking place on Thursday. The doors will open at 5:30 and the official question and answer, thank you, Landon, will be taking place at 6 p.m. We also have a flyer, so we will go ahead and send that out to you all if you want to attend, but more importantly, if you'd like to share within your networks of folks in the Goleta region, so the community members in that area can attend the meeting as well. So that'll be taking place this Thursday. And then
Catherine, what time again is it? Thursday at 6. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, 6 p.m. And then the walkthrough is at 5:30. you can get there a half hour early and mingle with everyone and take a look at one of the units. And we'll email out that flyer. And then just a brief announcement. We are in the process of merging our working groups with the county and the continuum of care. So that means for our housing and shelter working group, we won't be hosting a meeting this coming month. The county operates their groups on a quarterly schedule, and so we're going to be following that schedule as well. And we're going to have more detailed information because right now we're still kind of planning things out of logistically what that's going to look like. So once we have that information, we are going to be sending that out and be sharing in our future meetings, because we have a couple of other working group schedules, working groups that are being scheduled next month still, but the housing and working group specifically will not be taking place next month as we're going to be moving to that quarterly schedule. So look for that announcement and email in your box. And again, we'll share that information in future meetings, but just wanted to put that out there right now. Yes, Jonathan. The county is a collaborative applicant with the continuum of care who operates the community action plan and their working groups, if you will. I believe, sorry, Kimberly, if there's a different name. Oh, she jumped off. But we are shifting to be aligned with those groups. And that is all, unless no other questions, comments. All right, well, thank you all for being here, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. Oh, shoot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.